Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is peak Spider-Man content, from the extremely detail-oriented and stylistic visuals, to the excellent performances from all the voice actors, to the breathtaking score, to the spectacular writing throughout. I was amazed by what this film had to offer. This is a high 9 out of 10 for me. I think this film took a major step up in the visual department, and its script manages to be better than the first film script. I'm really excited for Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, more than I've ever been for a Spider-Man movie. With all of that out of the way, let's really break down this film.
I don't know how to fix this.
Well, join the club.
The opening gives us a visually incredible sequence that slots right into the style of Into the Spider-Verse, while having a dark twist in its score compared to the first film. As a reflection of Gwen's passion for music, the score relies on drums heard in rock bands as if Gwen was the one performing this. As this is being heard, Gwen immediately introduces Miles Morales for us, as a recap of the events from the first film is brought to us. Perfectly fitting character to narrate this, as Miles is the only person Gwen really considers a friend by this point, and this is meant to hint at a major fallout that Gwen feels directly responsible for. The recaps of the first film are heavily stylized to fit into Gwen's world, which relies on a wider variety of colors as well as the watercolor aesthetic, often aligning with her current emotional state. The stylization adhering to character as well as creating the aesthetic of a moving comic book is done spectacularly. It reminds me of when Spider-Man 2 did this in its recapping of its prior film. Details like this are what I feel can make this genre uniquely compelling to invest in, and it's great to see this film embrace the roots of where it's inspired from to begin with. In many ways, this is apparent throughout the entire film, ranging from minor details or even significant plot points. While the recap is largely focused on Miles' story and can guide one to the belief that this is primarily Miles' story, I feel this film takes it a step further and pushes Gwen to being just as central of a character as Miles, even more prevalent of a character than Peter B. Parker was in Into the Spider-Verse. The film opens up with Gwen's backstory, and she serves as our opening narrator for what we as an audience are in for. And as the film progresses, we do see that Gwen experiences a journey arguably as important to her as Miles' journey is to him, and I think this was balanced strongly throughout. In an attempt to join a band, she does everything her way and neglects everyone else. This is reflective of a broader character flaw she possesses, even shown in Into the Spider-Verse. She was largely restrictive towards the idea of even making friends, only truly having opened up to the idea through Miles. Since Peter's death, she considered the idea of even having friends to be a distraction to her ability to be a hero and keep everyone safe. While it is driven by a desire to ultimately serve the greater good, it's still not a fully rational one, since it's built on fear and paranoia rather than reason, even if it seems reasonable from her perspective. Everyone around her is telling her she clearly needs help, and isolating herself won't do her any good, and yet she refuses under the belief that they can never understand what she is going through, nor is she able to talk to them about it.
In this line of work, you always wind up a solo act.
The moment Gwen reflects on her friendships with Peter and Miles relies on a series of really strong transitions that match her state of mind and remain concurrent with the environment around her. From the showcasing of her suit when she mentions her line of work, to Miles appearing in the background of the window, or Gwen walking out of the train to transition into a flashback of the day Peter died, it's an efficient way to showcase Gwen's daily routine and her inner turmoil simultaneously. Seeing how important Peter was to her and how she protected him all these years really helps the moment where Peter is dying hit hard, and informs his decision to try to be special like her. He saw what she was able to achieve as a hero and always felt like nothing compared to her. It was always Gwen looking after him, and Peter just wanted to feel useful for once. It was his friendship with Gwen that led him down the path to his death, which also informs Gwen's decision to be afraid of getting too close to people. It's especially taxing to Gwen, because even if she never meant for Peter to die, it was still a consequence of something she did to him in a fight. In a way, she had no choice but to kill him, which makes it even worse when you consider that all of these circumstances gives her father full reason to believe that Spider-Woman murdered Peter, since all he can gather from that event is that Spider-Woman did something to hurt Peter that resulted in his death. Understandably upset by this, he orders a manhunt against Gwen, amplifying how haunting this event is to Gwen. She can only keep her cool for so long whenever this is brought up to her. She initially plays it off like she's looking forward to the conclusion of the case, but finds it harder to keep it together as her father won't rest the topic, even to the point he hammers in how he thinks Spider-Woman killed Peter. Gradually agitated by this, she acts defensively to try to avoid ever having to fight her father as Spider-Woman, but at the end of the day, he is her father, and them being family should matter most to them, above any disagreements they'll have with each other. I think the dynamic is strong and greatly sets up the conflict that will arise with them later. Soon after, Captain Stacy is alerted of a break-in by the Vulture, prompting Gwen to listen in on her end to stay up to date on the situation. Gwen then opens her drum and we see her suit alongside her photo with Miles there, a nice detail indicating that she thinks of him every time she puts the suit on. We get an outstanding swing sequence alongside a colorful city background, almost as if the sky is a giant canvas for a developing watercolor painting, and it starts to look more finished once it transitions into nighttime. This eventually leads into the fight with Vulture, where Gwen meets Miguel O'Hara and Jessica Drew. I think it's an excellent choice for Gwen and Miguel to initially be annoyed at each other as soon as they meet. Two characters who don't play greatly with others, especially when first meeting other people, makes for some great banter between the two. In trying to instigate Gwen not to ask any questions to let him finish his job, Miguel acts dismissively and quick with her at first. Gwen, not giving up very easily, continues to poke at Miguel to get him to explain who he is and what he's doing here. A detail that I appreciate is that she's immediately interested in the fact that Miguel could go to any dimension with that watch, most definitely thinking about Miles right now. Contrast to Gwen's initial meetup with Miguel, Gwen sees Jess as an inspiration, someone who managed to have her life figured out. Jess reveals she is living happily with a husband and that they're both soon to be parents. Compared to Gwen's tendency to push others away and struggle to find that balance in her life, Jess already makes it look easy for her, and possibly gives hope that Gwen may one day achieve that with Miles. Jess clearly sees herself in Gwen, almost like Gwen is a reflection of who Jess was when she was growing up. It drives her to push for her recruitment to Spider Society, even in spite of Gwen's connection to Miles. It immediately establishes a desire to bring Gwen to their level, and allow her to prove her worth in spite of Miguel's hesitance. It then helps Jess's case to see how Gwen takes the initiative to immediately devise a plan to save the people inside the helicopter, and prevent it from falling onto civilians, proving that her belief in Gwen isn't unfounded. The stylization of this teamwork shot is incredible. We have 3 different close-ups mashed together in a way that fits the comic book aesthetic that they're going for. All of this looks spectacular. The slow motion to capture Gwen's dexterity and being able to dodge the helicopter blades, the light projections maintaining the watercolor aesthetic, the way the camera follows Miguel alongside Jess's motorcycle, all of these are filled with engaging style choices that pull viewers into the action, as well as inciting tension by prolonging the helicopter being slowed down by all the spider people. Though I think the style choices shine best when we have Captain Stacy confronting Gwen and attempting to arrest her. The background scenery starts to visibly change, like a wet painting dripping on a canvas, once Gwen decides to unmask herself to try to get her father to understand her point of view and realize that she never tried to kill Peter. The pure shock in Captain Stacy's reaction is not just captured well by the way his facial movements and body language are animated, but also by the bright red background to exaggerate his shock and disappointment. And as Gwen tries to explain herself, the background becomes a mess. The color patterns become less coherent as these two are starting to disconnect. He no longer feels he can trust Gwen, as if he's looking at a complete stranger. Gwen recognizes this, and tries to question him on if it's truly rational for him to believe his daughter murdered her best friend. In trying to convince her dad that they're fighting for the same cause, the backgrounds change to match their outfits. Gwen's showing her mask, Captain Stacy's showing his uniform, shirt, and tie, to showcase that they ultimately should be on the same side, but the captain won't budge. And the backgrounds start to shift back to warmer colors, with an intense pattern right before the captain makes a significant but hard choice. The background shifts back to his uniform, to represent his loyalty to the system and his profession, believing that's the best and most fair course of action. Gwen's background feels like she's being pulled away from the conversation, thrown off by the realization of what her father is about to do. Before he can do anything to Gwen, Miguel rushes in to put a stop to it. Jess immediately decides to comfort Gwen to ensure that she doesn't have to be on the run, without anyone to turn to. Jess knows this isn't a fair environment for a kid to have to grow up in, and immediately insists that they'll support Gwen, in spite of Miguel's previous refusal and not having asked him again.
We got you. Right, Miguel?
Miguel looks down, trying to ignore what Jess is saying, not wanting to give in to sentiment too easily. It makes us wonder what makes Miguel so hesitant to bring her in, and resistant to sentimental appeals from other people. He remains focused on the bigger picture, but is pushed on this by Jess. By this point, we've only seen Miguel act bossy, authoritative, and cold towards other people, but his hesitancy to leave Gwen behind shows us that there's a heart beneath it all. At his core, he is still a hero.
I don't know how to fix this.
Miguel hears this, knowing he's having the exact same thought as her. Miguel is uncertain if this mission of his will even save the multiverse, if it's even practical. He'll have to maintain canon, but he can't do so alone. He'll have to jump to other universes in order to even do this efficiently. So when he tells Gwen to join the club, he isn't just referring to Spider Society, but he's also referring to the fact that none of them are absolutely certain of how they're going to fix the problems they face. But the best they can do is try to find purpose and make the most of it. Miguel's purpose is leading the Spider Society to stabilize and control the multiverse as much as possible. Gwen's is helping his cause rather than being left in a world that will try to stop her no matter what, with nobody for her to turn to. Gwen is handed over her ticket to belonging somewhere, while she feels completely lost and abandoned. She gives one last look at her father, not wanting to leave him behind, but knowing she'll achieve more out there, than she ever would staying home. We cut to black, and our focus shifts to our other most important character, Miles.
I'm Spider-Man. No one can take that away from me.
Unbelievable.
We're given an introduction reminiscent of our introduction to the first Peter Parker in Into the Spider-Verse, but we're not quite at the catch-up montage just yet. From the jump, Miles' struggle with duality is brought to the forefront since he needs to find balance between being a superhero and being a student, and more importantly, being a son. Miles sees the spectacular failures and fumbles of the Spot, giving him a basis to feel overconfident, as if this robber isn't worth taking seriously, but is worth letting him humiliate himself for the laughs before he turns him in. We're given a great recap by Miles, largely stylized by his interest in drawing, as opposed to Gwen's interest in music. We transition back and forth between the primary animation style and the animations of Miles' drawings, as well as the numerous settings that cover the history he has made as New York's second Spider-Man, ranging from newer developments, mistakes, or villains. We're also given a setup for Miles' temptations and worries that come with the idea of revealing who he truly is to his parents. While Miles sees benefits, he also sees the possibility of a messy conflict. We're also shown his desire to see his other spider friends again through his frequent drawings, or through spray-painted works of art. Rather than relying on frequent dialogue to suggest this to us, showing us pages and pages of these drawings helps indicate how strong his desire to reunite with them is. He even includes Uncle Aaron in some of these drawings. Even though his uncle was a negative part of his adventure with his friends, Miles still values the loving family member he was, and his desire to fight for Miles no matter what. This recap gives us a very strong grasp on where Miles is in his life, and where most of his desires, fears, and struggles lie, which lays the groundwork for the rest of the film to build on this. Miles' difficulty maintaining his identity to his parents while having to worry about stopping the Spot on time to make it to his meeting leads him to arriving late and looking unprofessional in front of his parents and academic advisor, and even worse, resulted in the Spot breaking free. On top of this, he's left with the concern of delivering the cakes on time for his father's party, while he has to go pursue the Spot. The consequences he faces are generally minor at first, but they gradually escalate as Miles continues to fail at meeting his commitments. Despite all of Miles' efforts to make both of his lives work, he still ends up suffering for it. To make up for his lack of professionalism and chronic lateness, he goes above and beyond in ordering these cakes to be as heartfelt and thorough as possible, even to the point of risking lateness. But even then, that's still not enough. He still has to deal with criminals or supervillains on his way back home. He has to rush as quickly as possible, and in the process, his cakes that he worked so hard on to be as meaningful as possible to his father get ruined. His struggle with duality plays into his overarching dilemma. Do I tell my parents the truth to heal our relationship, or will telling them the truth destroy everything? His approach towards handling his struggle of balancing both lives is focused on finding ways to make both work, rather than giving up on one over the other. One of these ways can involve letting his parents in on it, working with them to evade any obstacles that secrecy creates. But there's another alternative, one that Miles believes is where his strength as a hero and as a person comes from.
What's it gonna take for Miguel O'Hara to notice Miles Morales?
I'll put in a good word.
Miles believes that the best way for him to improve his work as a hero is to turn to those who have experienced this line of work for much longer than he has, those who have gone through the same struggles he did, and would know exactly what to do or say in the situations he's in.
Miles, we're probably the only ones who do understand.
This was what helped him overcome Uncle Aaron's death, assurement that everyone else has been there and seems to have all the answers on how to deal with this.
When will I know I'm ready?
You won't. It's a leap of faith. That's all it is, Miles. A leap of faith.
Miles believes his greatest strengths come from what he does as Spider-Man, all of which came from his spider friends.
I love you! I am so proud of you! Are all kids?
And would luck have it that Gwen arrives to reunite with Miles and catch up with him. To his delight, they're now able to catch up and we get a really fluid-looking sequence of them two swinging. It just looks sensational, and I love how Miles and Gwen's conversation comes across as very organic. And I love how we're already given a hint at the fact that Gwen isn't supposed to be here by the fact she dodged Miles' question on why she's decided to show up now. Even though she's only here to keep watch of someone who crossed dimensions, she also wants to take advantage of the trust she was given in order to make time to catch up with Miles, one of the only opportunities she'd have to do so. In trying to balance this, she keeps watch periodically while also having her interactions with Miles. To follow up with Miles' dilemma on whether or not he should tell his parents the truth, Gwen immediately shuts down the idea of it as Miles brings it up, informed by her earlier experience in the film. And since Miles sees his greatest strengths rooting from his ties to other spider people, he remains conflicted rather than encouraged to tell them the truth. This of course sets up later parts of the film to challenge this way of thinking.
In every other universe, Gwen Stacy falls for Spider-Man. And in every other universe, it doesn't end well.
Maybe she doesn't see it yet, but her touching on the subject and not shutting down Miles when he says this indicates to me that she's fairly conflicted on Miguel's cause, not on saving the multiverse, but on Miguel's view of sticking to canon.
Well, it's the first time for everything, right?
Things between Miles and Gwen start to take a noticeable decline when Miles starts to question her on what it takes to join Spider Society, and Gwen suggests it's unlikely he'd be let on. Miles is uncomfortable by this, but gives a response in acceptance of it, though Gwen wants to make sure he isn't doubting that she wants him there. The conversation here is directed very well, because the energy and enthusiasm we saw earlier in the film is fading away here, with awkward pauses and more straight faces being used. It is then made worse by Miles almost finding out something he wasn't supposed to, sparking panic in Gwen that comes across as frustration on Miles' end. And before they get the chance for this brief outburst to pass by long enough for it to be pretty much forgotten, Miles' parents jump into the conversation and end up humiliating Miles in front of Gwen. The atmosphere becomes colder the more the conversation goes on, and to make the timing worse, Gwen is called in by the Watch to report any updates, forcing her to leave the conversation and leave Miles on a dour note. What was meant as a positive reunion turned into an awkward and rushed departure, which makes the relationship more compelling to watch, since now I'm left wondering if this means she's going to try to move on from Miles, or if she'll ever address to him what she's really been hiding from him, or how Miles would react if he were to find out. We've already been given hints at the beginning that Gwen feels responsible for hurting Miles in some way, and this is really where the setup starts to get built upon by the film.
I think you're getting pretty good at being a parent. You think you got it licked, and then they go and grow up.
It's just hard to see my little man not being my little boy all the time.
Rio and Jeff are largely driven by having to make adjustments to Miles getting older. For many years they've been used to Miles having his path and agenda set by them, in hopes to guide him the best they can to ensure he has the best future he can have. There comes a cutoff point where they need to start letting Miles take control of that, and Miles is understandably upset by this.
We all make choices in life.
It doesn't feel like I have a choice.
You
right now.
don't!
New Jersey's too far from New York?
There's great schools in Brooklyn.
I say, you gotta let him spread his wings, man. It's my life.
It's not your life. It's mine, and your father's, and your abuelos y abuelas.
I think you're getting pretty good at being a parent. You think you got it licked, and then they go and grow up.
This contributes to Jeff's feeling of inadequacy, because of his difficulty of adapting to the changes Miles will go through as he grows up. Rio outlines to Miles her fears of seeing Miles grow up when she realizes she might have been at fault for pushing away one of Miles' friends. To confront the overarching issue, she decides it's time for her to be upfront with Miles about what's really worrying her and Jeff. And through that openness and willingness to be vulnerable in front of him, that allows for more comfort for Miles to express whatever it is he's been hiding from them. They can tell he's been keeping a secret, and he wants to talk about it, but he's too afraid to talk about it. Which Rio realizes is because they make themselves so hard to approach from Miles' perspective. Rio realizes that through openness and vulnerability, Miles will feel less like he's cornered all the time, and more like they're on an equal playing field. Parents can often be seen as figures that will always talk and demand, but never listen or even think to change. Jeff largely gave off that impression to Miles throughout the previous talks. Rio makes it clear that it's their time to listen, and Miles almost tells her the truth because of this, but out of fear of what happened to Gwen happening to him, he keeps quiet. Rio notices this hesitation and realizes that the next course of action should be to lower the restrictions on Miles and let him make his own plans for a change, without having to do so behind their backs all the time. This speech Rio gives is very strongly resonant with the rest of the film, and does a nice job diving into her mindset from the beginning.
For years, I've been taking care of this little boy, right? Making sure he is loved, that he feels like he belongs wherever he wants to be. He wants to go out into the world and do great big things. And what I worry about most is they won't look out for you like us. They won't root for you like us. Wherever you go from here, you have to promise to take care of that little boy for me. Make sure he never forgets where he came from. And he never doubts that he is loved. And he never lets anyone at those big fancy places he's gonna be in tell him that he doesn't belong there. And when he comes home, and he better come home, you're gonna be early, and you're gonna be holding a normal, nice cake.
I promise.
Just don't get lost.
He can't be part of this.
I know. I'll never see him again.
Gwen is soon confronted with the fact she has failed to properly keep track of the Spot. Because of her choice to be with Miles, as well as her not taking the Spot seriously, she loses him and he manages to arrive in another dimension. Jess's disappointment is believable, considering she had originally pushed for Gwen to be part of the team because she saw potential in her, and now Miguel's original suspicions were being proven right. In these few months Gwen has been around, she has earned enough respect to be considered Jess's star pupil, someone she never even felt she had to worry about.
Amazing! My star pupil, everyone.
I'll get him, okay?
Jess is reasonably frustrated by this, but because she sees herself in Gwen and would understand what she's going through, she's willing to give her another chance.
You never made a mistake? Never got too close to someone?
I did. But I got over it.
Knowing the punishment Gwen might be doomed to if she tells Miguel, she's willing to put aside her obligation to Miguel in order to ensure Gwen has another shot at being able to help them, as she has been for the past few months. While she's willing to give her another chance, she does keep a close eye throughout to make sure she's actually making progress.
Goodbye, Miles.
Believing this is the last time she'll truly ever be able to see him, she reluctantly leaves and has to force herself to move on. She gets frustrated by Miles returning anyway, to the point she harshly says,
I shouldn't have ever come to see you.
Dang.
The power of the multiverse in the palm of my hand.
The Spot is a fun villain. Loads of fun. He's not the most complex Spider-Man villain you'll find, but he goes through a personal journey that makes him very compelling to follow, and even excites me for what he'll have to offer in Beyond the Spider-Verse. He starts off as a pathetic bank robber, someone who could barely get by in life because of the events of Into the Spider-Verse. He ended up suffering because of the Collider's explosion, and has grown a desire to get back at Spider-Man for what he's done to him. To a comical degree, he fails, but that starts to become the point of his character, rather than just a weightless gag. It's funny to watch him fail, and because of this, the characters largely underestimate him and don't take him seriously. But we start to see him stray away from that once he realizes he is capable of traveling through the multiverse as his own natural ability. He grows in power once he collects more dark matter, then makes it his goal to arrive at another super collider to grow even stronger in power. All of this to ensure his revenge on Spider-Man. He heads to Mumbattan to achieve this, and maintains his goofy, sarcastic attitude we've grown used to. While he's treated with much more weight as a threat, he's still not ultimately seen as one of the greatest threats they've faced, not someone that they're exactly afraid of. That is until...
I'm gonna take everything from you, like you took everything from me. See you back home, Spider-Man.
The Spot has now achieved a level of power that can level entire worlds, the consequence that Miguel desperately wants to avoid. Alongside the route of getting back at Spider-Man, the Spot wants to prove Miles wrong, that he is absolutely a villain worth taking seriously and not a joke, someone to be feared like no other villain out there. His motives were initially focused on desperate revenge, but learning of his potential and constantly being ridiculed motivated him to be Spider-Man's greatest nemesis out there. Spot has immediately become a largely intimidating villain that the audience is dreading to see return, since now we know he has the means and intentions to take away characters that we've grown to care for.
I'm invited to HQ? Woo!
We're introduced to a whole new world, showing us how busy Miguel has been, something for Miles to feel wowed by and feel completely safe and secure. He almost believes he can't lose now that he has ties to Spider Society, and that the boss wants to meet him. Throughout the sequence, we're shown several exotic variations of Spider people, even one of my favorites.
Are you talking to me?
Most of these people are on the case of stopping Spot, establishing the level of importance this anomaly has jumped to throughout Spider Society. Showing us the numerous different anomalies throughout the multiverse does plenty for the world building, showing us how busy the Spider Society is on a regular basis. Generally speaking, they have their hands full, with a wide variety of different tasks to carry out, and I can't stress this enough, but the amount of detail put in the animation in this film is incredible. For all these hundreds of Spider people in the background, it's insane.
Come on, go easy on the kid. He had a terrible teacher.
Peter B. Parker, one of my favorite Peter Parker adaptations out there. This character is so hard not to love. Seeing his reunion with Miles is amazingly heartwarming, especially since Miles now gets to meet Mayday, who Peter had because of Miles. Into the Spider-Verse set this up very well, as it was his pride in being able to grow Miles as a hero and as a person that made him realize that not only can he be a great father, but now he wants to be, and Mayday is a great representation of that growth he was given. I've seen some people question why he'd bring Mayday to Spider Society, but Spider Society is considered a safe house for all these spider people. It'd be like a parent driving their kid to work with them. I've also seen people claim that his character was destroyed for bringing Mayday on the chase, but the chase in question involves hundreds of spider people chasing after one kid who has no intentions of hurting his baby, and Mayday is literally strapped in restraints while being held close by Peter, when Peter literally has super strength. So I refuse to accept the idea that he's seriously risking Mayday with all of the stunts he's pulling off, and I also don't accept that this is out of character considering this same Peter Parker thought it was suitable to force a kid like Miles to learn web swinging on the spot while they were facing rapid gunfire, as opposed to holding onto Miles himself like he would with any other civilian he would bring away from danger.
Everybody knows that the best way to learn is under intense life-threatening pressure.
While Peter isn't actively putting Mayday into the action, the situation is light enough and low stakes enough for Peter to believe he can safely bring her along for the experience to show what it's like to do what he does as Spider-Man, as early exposure for her. He sees this as beneficial to Mayday's development. He even wants Mayday to turn out like Miles, so he would want her to have some kind of experience, some kind of memories of who Miles was, and Peter's pride in shaping him. People have brought up MJ asking if Peter brought Mayday to another fight, but we have zero context for what other fight Mayday would have been in. It could have been an unarmed robbery where Peter has no way of actually failing this. If Mayday was to witness a fight on the level of Spider-Man dealing with, Marco and O'Hearn, then I don't think there's much to worry about. People have also taken issue with Peter bringing Mayday at the end of the film, but we have no context on which specific location they're going, what their specific plan is, or even when this is. But what we do know is that Peter has a huge team of spider people there to ensure Mayday is safe. And for all we know, Miles' reunion with the spider people could be one of the earliest plot points and take place minutes after we see Gwen's last shot in the film. And considering Mayday is often known for calming situations, he believes it's worth bringing Mayday to calm down Miles. Not only would this indicate trust to Miles, but it would also stay in line with how Peter wants Mayday to turn out like Miles, and there's no better way to make that happen than allowing her to interact with Miles, even at a lower point of his, to see him grow and do better.
And you are so bad at holding a baby.
You have a choice between saving one person and saving an entire world, every world.
I can do both!
This part of the film was the height of my investment. I loved just about everything that was done with the concept of canon events, and it allowed for the most compelling dilemma in a Spider-Man movie to be pulled off. Though this does seem to lean somewhat on the controversial side. Let's first discuss what canon events are. Canon events are based on a theory developed by Miguel O'Hara, based on the common occurrences within every Spider story, every time. Uncle Ben's death is a canon event. Spider-Man No More is a canon event. If This Be My Destiny is a canon event. While this theory was believed in by Miguel, he originally saw no harm in breaking it. Out of desperation for a life where he can be happy, he tried to find a world where he had died, so he could replace him and pursue happiness there. For some time, it worked, but then it resulted in the annihilation of an entire world. Miguel's break in canon sparked a severe level of trauma and caused him to adhere to the canon as much as possible, as a first resort above all else. Even if it's not absolutely necessary or based in full certainty, Miguel will present it as if it is, as if he's the expert with all the answers and data on him, and it's overall the safest route to take in protecting people's lives. By being the leader who seems to have all the answers and data at his disposal, he has the power to convince many into his cause. Miles ends up questioning this. Miguel is primarily basing this off one experience, one that traumatized him and likely factors into Miguel acting on fear and paranoia rather than pure reason, even if Miguel can convincingly present it as reason. As the first resort, seemingly without having considered other alternatives for what they could do or what may have caused the destruction of his world, Miguel is immediately on board with letting tragedy occur in order to maintain the stability of the world. Miguel tells him that Jeff's death happens in 2 days, with Lila following up by saying that's what the model says. Miles knows that this is an algorithm that's guiding their decisions to let the canon play out. An algorithm that Miguel would have designed and programmed with his own biases and values in mind. Biases and values that could come from Miguel's personal flaws too. If Miguel is mistaken, then so could the algorithm.
We're just supposed to let people die because some algorithm says that that's supposed to happen?
And them being wrong means that Miles would not only allow his father to die, but an endless stream of people throughout the infinite multiverse die, without legitimate enough reason. From Miles' perspective, he can still find a way to do both, and he hasn't been given enough reason to believe he can't.
That wasn't me. That was the spot.
It's what happens when you break the canon.
Miles would know that the spot could have been stopped before he activated the collider and became more powerful. If Miles had stopped the spot before he became more powerful at Mumbattan, then the police captain would have been alive without a quantum void opening up. That is proof to Miles that he can do both. While Miguel's concerns for the integrity of every world are valid, Miles' concerns for the infinite lives that will be lost to the canon playing out are also valid. There is nuance to both sides that the film explores. Neither side is solely right or wrong. Miguel has a point that as Spider-Man, they should be willing to make the hard sacrifices. That is part of the job. If it comes down to having to choose between one person or an entire world, then they should accept that a sacrifice has to be made. On principle, Miguel is correct. However, Miguel's definition of when that becomes necessary is largely skewed by his own personal trauma, which means his conclusions aren't always guided by reason, and because of this, the deaths of countless people could possibly be done for nothing, an outcome which Miles reasonably wants to avoid. If we can save both, we should at least try. And although Miles is right to feel this way, he is largely driven by an optimistic and hopeful point of view of what Spider-Man can achieve, even to a degree that isn't as realistic as Miles believes.
I can do both! Spider-Man always...
Not always.
The hardest thing about this job is you can't always save everybody.
While Miles will have a more optimistic mindset on what he can achieve once he becomes Spider-Man, an older and more experienced Spider-Man would have a more realistic viewpoint on this.
Miles, we all want to live the life we wish we had. Believe me, I have tried. And the harder I tried, the more damage I did. You can't have it all, kid. Being Spider-Man is a sacrifice. That's the job. That's what you signed up for.
Feeling betrayed, like he's being cornered into an unfair position by his friends, Miles is immediately angered. Being the emotionally intelligent man he is, Peter looks down and thinks before he retorts. Even if he believes Miles is wrong, he's still his friend and he needs to be careful how he responds to avoid escalation. To ease Miles' anger, he tries to get him to slow down before he says something he may regret. But then...
All right, Gwen. You should have never come to see me.
By her immediate tearing up upon hearing this, we can tell that she was only forcing herself to say that as a means of moving on as just wanted her to. But not only is she hurt by having her only friend say this, but she's also realizing the effect this would have had on Miles when she said that to him, and feels in no position to defend herself.
I think the reason this will age badly is that over time, Spider-Man fans are going to get more and more frustrated with how their favorite Spider-Man, or their preferred Spider-Man, or their known Spider-Man went along with the whole plan. But Miles didn't. That is, I think, a core issue in this film that they just had to bulldoze through in order to have the story they want. I think Peter Parker's Spider-Man / variants of him is the worst, possibly the worst hero to choose for being complacent in a world of we have to let our loved ones die in order to maintain canon. He might be the worst one to pick to make go along with that sort of thing, especially when the evidence is so flimsy. It's like, I went into a different universe and then it fell apart, so I'm pretty sure it was my fault. And it's like, I have a feeling by the time we hit the next film that they're going to reveal that's not true. And that all the other Peter... Even Gwen, I was very confused by. She seems to go along with it right up until she's like, actually, nah.
This is a fairly common misunderstanding of the film, but a good segue for me to get into why every returning Spider-Person we see has a reason to be part of the Spider Society, and contrary to what's being said here, Peter Parker variants are actually one of the better choices they could have went with to agree with Miguel on Canon Events, considering their extensive experiences having to make sacrifices, and the fact that Peter B. Parker literally argues something that applies to every Peter Parker and would reasonably move them towards Miguel's ideology.
If not for Uncle Ben, most of us wouldn't be here, Miles. All the good we did, it wouldn't have been done.
Peter Parker would not have learned his lesson if Ben didn't die. Ben had to die in order for Peter to fully grasp the gravity of the consequences of his actions. It was the guilt that initially drove him to be a hero. Peter Parker being a hero is what allowed the city, even the world, to be saved several times over. If Ben didn't die that night, the city may never have been saved all those times, and the world would have ended at some point because Spider-Man failed to act. Peter Parker himself would understand this better than anyone else, and Miguel would absolutely take advantage of that, and this is just one of many appeals Miguel would have made in order to bring them over to his side. One may claim that the evidence Miguel has is flimsy, but Peter B. Parker is literally in the video of Miguel's world ending when it happened, and he would have known that Miguel had disrupted the canon. Miguel makes sure that Peter remembers remembers this to hammer home the devastating consequences that he wants to avoid. Miguel's evidence isn't flimsy if he literally has a video of this happening and has an algorithm that has often correctly predicted the timing of these canon events. There would also be instances where these kinds of unravelings almost happen, such as when the Vulture was about to disrupt canon on Gwen's Earth, causing an entire building to glitch. She was there to witness that. Miguel is also the expert on this, who even developed this theory on canon events, and seems to have all the answers for how this stuff works. All this compiled with the understanding that Ben's death allowed Peter to save the city and the world countless times could easily persuade Peter Parker into thinking that this is simply one of the sacrifices that comes with the job, especially for Peter Parker variants that are used to having to make sacrifices like this all the time, more so than Miles has. In fact, let's actually talk about every single Spider-Person that ended up agreeing with Miguel. I disagree with those who think this is coming out of a vacuum, when a very similar choice had to be made in Into the Spider-Verse. In Into the Spider-Verse, the entire team knew that staying in the wrong dimension too long would result in their deaths.
The only way home is back through that collider gizmo. The only trouble is...
one of us has to stay behind and destroy it.
In spite of this, every last one of them offered to be the one to stay behind and destroy the collider at the cost of their way home, and thus the cost of their own life.
None of you can stay here. If you stay here, you'll die.
You need to be more honest with yourself about this. He's not ready, it's obvious.
They had a choice between saving one of them or saving an entire world, every world.
I'm the only one staying.
If you stay here, you'll die.
I'm doing what needs to be done.
But wait, that doesn't happen. One of them finds a way to do both, to bring everyone home and save the multiverse, and that person was Miles Morales.
Spider-Man?
He didn't give in to the same fears that made the rest of them push Miles away from the mission. He took the leap of faith and made the best attempt to find a way to do both. Why do you think Miles is the character they chose to be the most resistant to Miguel's cause? It is most consistent for Miles to be the one to push the hardest on this. And since some people think that this film is supposedly going to upset Spider-Man fans because their favorite Spider-Man was complicit in Miguel's cause, I'm going to talk about these iterations and look back at their stories in the shows and games that they're being pulled from.
I've never heard of any of these fucking Spider people. But, you know, that's my fault. I'm not as familiar, because it's funny, right? I was watching it and I was seeing all these different people and I was like, I'm guessing that's from a cartoon. I'm guessing that one's from, is that the game one? Because I didn't even play the game one yet.
I don't want to keep reading studies and stuff like that.
Let's start with the Insomniac version. Straight away, Peter literally had to make a very similar choice that Miguel is telling Miles to make. Peter had a choice between saving Aunt May and saving an entire city. He chose to let May die to save everybody else. And let's consider how different his decision may have been if Ben never died and he never learned his lesson. If he never learned his lesson, then he most definitely would have chosen Aunt May over the entire city. Even earlier in the game, he knew that the villains were out causing havoc in the city, but he also knew at the same time that May was being attacked by escaped convicts. He still went after the villains first because they were a greater danger to the overall city rather than going to help May. If Peter believes he has to make a sacrifice, even of his loved ones, to save everyone else, he'll do it. This is part of the sacrifices that Spider-Man chooses to make, and to shift over to Spider-Man 2, Peter was told by Kurt that taking the symbiote off Harry is probably going to kill him. Peter would have to choose between letting Harry die, or letting him take over the world as Venom. While Peter hopes to save Harry in the process, he's still willing to commit to his plan to remove the symbiote, which almost killed Harry. If Miles wasn't able to save Harry, then Peter's plan would have caused Harry's death. Miguel would thoroughly discuss this history Peter had in having to make choices like this, and take advantage of that in convincing him to his cause. The next Peter Parker I want to talk about is Spider-Man Unlimited, who we see in the background and we even see as Venom appear in the showcasing of Canon Events. In his one-season series, John Jameson informed the public that Counter-Earth has been taken over, and that their Earth may be next. Peter spends months preparing resources and a plan to survive the trip to Counter-Earth, and return John Jameson back to Earth, who would likely have plenty of important information on Counter-Earth and how to best prepare for an attack by them. Once he arrived at Counter-Earth and met up with John Jameson, John declined his offer to be brought back to Earth.
You could be the pivotal piece in this war.
I came here to rescue John Boy, not to storm some Counter-Earth Bastille. It's not my planet.
Maybe you are nothing but a coward hiding behind a dime store mask.
You have the nerve to call me that after what we've just been through? I think you might want to reconsider.
John wants to fight for the innocent civilians on Counter-Earth that are at the mercy of the High Evolutionary. Peter Parker, like Miguel O'Hara would, is thinking of the bigger picture, and wants to bring John back home so they can prepare on their home planet for what's to come. Rather than opting for helping the little guys encounter Earth, Peter was focused on the fact that it wasn't his planet. If Peter remains on this planet controlled by the High Evolutionary, then he may not be able to prepare for what happens if the High Evolutionary goes after Earth. If he doesn't make it back to his planet while he can, his planet could be at the mercy of the High Evolutionary. If Peter naturally felt he had to choose between which world to prioritize in order to stop the High Evolutionary, it's absolutely believable that Miguel could have talked him into his theory on canon events and why they need to be followed.
The Goblin was wrong when he said I didn't really want to help those folks. But I wonder, if I could have gotten to the cockpit and piloted the ship, what would I really have done?
Very clear, no, never again. I'm never looking the other way again. I don't care what the consequences are. I'm never going to do that again. So I cannot fathom our Peter Parker from Spectacular siding with Miguel against Miles over the idea of letting his father die for the sake of the canon. Now, I don't know where the third movie's going. I've got no input. Just to be very clear, I'm not in contact with these people. I have no input on this whatsoever. I don't know what the end result is. I don't know where this movie is going. What I know is that the Peter that we wrote would not take that side.
I finally want to talk about Peter Parker from the Spectacular Spider-Man. By this point, I've already laid out several arguments that can already apply to this version of Peter, but let's take a brief look at his history anyway. The first season of the series consists of Peter constantly making sacrifices and wondering to himself if it's even worth it all. He realizes it's pointless to keep the gene cleanser around in case he ever does plan to quit, because he won't ever quit.
Spider-Man is who I am. My destiny.
Peter has already accepted the sacrificial aspects that come with being Spider-Man. On top of this, he lost Captain Stacy when he gave his life to save someone, which would further cement the importance of making sacrifices to him. But to be told now that all of this was for a reason, for the preservation of an entire world, that'll make Peter believe that their sacrifices weren't in vain and that something greater was achieved because of it. It can help serve as a form of closure for what he has lost. This version of Spider-Man is young and impressionable, and seeing this older, more experienced Spider-Man from the future, who is an expert in this field, tell him these events need to play out, as well as evidence of the potential consequences of it if they don't play out, Peter is going to be moved towards a stance on the matter, and it wasn't easy for him to accept either.
We know it's hard, but it's the truth, Miles.
One might say Peter should have pushed as hard as Miles did, but we have to remember that Miguel would have given Peter much more time to talk about it and process what's being said. Miguel shut down the conversation with Miles very early on, likely because he doesn't intend to have him in Spider Society anyway, and he'd rather focus his attention towards preparing for what the Spot will do. Miguel would give Spectacular Peter the time of day, and explore the topic in more depth, from more angles, or show more data he would have on the matter, because he actually intends to bring Peter into Spider Society. There would be a stronger commitment and effort towards convincing Peter than convincing Miles. Miguel just wanted to give Miles the bare minimum and keep him restrained, which to Miles looks like a lack of transparency and would inherently reduce trust. For all Miles knows, Miguel could be lying or withholding something, either mistakenly or out of bias. Miguel has no reason for such a lack of transparency when talking to someone like Peter, and will take the many days needed to change someone's mind on his cause. Miles may have actually been convinced by Miguel had he given him the time of day and didn't suspiciously appear to lack transparency in discussing the matter. But that isn't what happened. People have also cited Peter's first confrontation with Tombstone as evidence that he would never agree with Miguel on the canon. I understand where people are coming from, but we have to remember that from Peter's perspective, neglecting Miguel's evidence of the potential consequences would be looking the other way for the worlds that would end by constantly breaking canon. If Peter helps Miles break the canon, this will kill his father anyway. He can't save everyone. Josh Keaton also had an interesting explanation for this in a livestream he did talking about the film.
Year in his life, he's lost Uncle Ben. And at that point, it's like he starts to develop that fondness for Captain Stacy. You know, it's never explicitly said in the show, but you know that Captain Stacy knows exactly that the two are the same person. And I like to believe that him and Gwen would have been more of a thing. Like, again, that's me just thinking it. I don't know if that was what was intended, but that was always, it just seemed to me in the writing that was like his lobster, and that's who he was intended to end up with, because everything always kind of circled back to her. And so they're gonna obviously end up being close, and so The only way I could see it is that, the way I rationalize it, is that if Captain Stacy did die, that's another massive male figure in his life that's now gone. And Peter blames himself for absolutely everything that happens to people. He takes it upon himself and you know, really just tortures himself over these things. Tortures himself over Uncle Ben, saying, you know, not my problem. And so it's, if somebody comes from the future, another Spider-Man, and basically explains to you, hey, you know, this is all part of a bigger thing, it's hard for me to not believe that a young, impressionable Spider-Man, who every time he has somebody that he really looks up to and cares about, being just taken from him that way, is not going to now look up to this other person who seems to have all the answers and believe that, you know, maybe this is possible, and maybe this is part of the sacrifice that I have to make as Spider-Man, that I can't save everybody. I can try, but I can't save everybody. And you know, like, and again, who's to say that that decision holds? You know, this is just him as a snapshot of where he's at in time.
Now, the last character I want to go over is Hobie. And before I do, I want to briefly use him as an example for a concept to demonstrate. We know that Hobie deep down doesn't actually subscribe to what Miguel has put out. Hobie is largely against listening to authority figures, especially if they use manipulative or forceful means to bring people onto their side, or act based on their interests. The moment he meets Miles, he tries to sway him away from the idea of being part of Spider Society, or at least mitigating his strong desire to be a part of it. In some way or another, Miles will figure out why he doesn't belong there in Miguel's eyes, and would more likely push against Miguel's cause. Hobie gives Miles the opportunity to take in what Canon Events are, and take advantage of any resistance he'd have towards the idea. Miles is one of the most powerful Spider-Men out there, and could be Hobie's opportunity to actually make a difference in how Spider Society operates. This is key, because even if you're unhappy with your favorite Spider-Man being on Miguel's side, we don't even know if they actually subscribe to his side, or if they're just pretending to, because the alternative would cause them to just be kicked out and have zero chance of changing anything. Hobie joined the Spider Society and followed their orders, but only because he wants there to be a change, and he's gradually waiting for an opportunity that he finds strong enough. And while most of them engage in that chase, that could easily have been to maintain the impression of being on Miguel's side, with plans to try to shift Miguel's perspective later. Keeping Miles would be beneficial for that, because even in a cage, Miles can try to reach people with his words, and incite more voices to challenge Miguel. And notice how by the end of the film, those that spent the most time with Hobie were easiest to sway over to Miles' side. Gwen doesn't even have a response ready when Miles pushes against her. Only Peter and Miguel do, because they're more committed to the cause, whereas Gwen is more so on the conflicted side, especially due to Hobie's influence. They absolutely have talked about this stuff with each other, and we know Hobie tends to drop hints that Spider Society shouldn't be held in the highest regard. Miles is his perfect opportunity to attempt some kind of change, which is made apparent by him helping Miles escape once he's held in the containment that Miguel forces him in. And then...
Said not to call me that!
This chase is my favorite action sequence in a Spider-Man movie. It's intense, exciting, makes me really want to root for Miles' character. It's amazing seeing him overpower all of these spider people who see him as this anomaly, someone who shouldn't be here. Though I've seen some people claim that this action sequence is plot armor and that Miles shouldn't have been able to escape and not be caught, allow me to push back on this through a breakdown of this sequence. I'd first like to mention that a Spider-Person webbing or grabbing Miles isn't an end-all be-all. It's not like the Flash being able to disarm you before you can even blink. If someone shoots webs at Miles, he can dodge them. If someone successfully webs onto Miles, he can always rip it off. If groups attempt to do this, Miles can build up a charge and shock all of them all at once, as we just saw. And The Amazing Spider-Man 2 shows us that this can be detrimental to a Spider-Person's web shooters. If Miles is grabbed, he can hit back. If Miles is grabbed by a group of people, he can either use his surroundings to mess with their tech, or Venom strike them. If he ever truly has to, he can briefly go invisible to confuse his opponents, though he doesn't need to do that in this fight. It's also very important to remember that Miles is one of the most powerful spider people out there. By accident, he managed to knock out Peter B. Parker for a good minute or two with his Venom Blast, so if he ever needs to rely on it, that would prevent him from being captured. Miles not being caught isn't plot armor. And let's break down this chase as a whole. Miles starts out by hiding behind this one guy as he's planning out how to execute this chase. He gets turned around and they all see him. He does his best to evade them by swinging away or dodging their webs or leaps towards him. We see right here that Miles is grabbed by numerous people, but they're capable of losing grip if Miles swings and pulls hard enough to bump them into each other and escape their grasp. We see he's very clearly capable of dodging these explosives shot at him. He gets his face blocked by Spider-Cat, and once he pushes the cat off, the cat immediately tries to blind him. Miles rips it off before he's shot at, then runs to evade these web shots. Because shooting webs isn't always the most precise from long distances, it adds up that they'll get close to Miles but won't land on him perfectly. And if Spider-Man can dodge bullets with spider sense, it's possible to dodge webbing too. Miles starts jumping away to evade this group of spider people. Most of them are trying to catch up to Miles with their webs, but we see Unlimited Spider-Man attempting to grab Miles, and he's almost successful in doing so. Some may say that he should have webbed instead of grabbing, but grabs are harder to break out of than webbing. You'd imagine that Spider-Man's arm would be stronger than their webbing, thus harder to rip off. On the left, we see a variant attempting to swing faster than Miles in order to intercept him from the front, which makes enough sense to attempt. The next closest Spider-Person tries to swing and grab Miles, but misses by a hair, then is pushed downwards by Miles while the others try to pursue him. Bagman also manages to grab him, but has his head slightly pushed down after he misses. Miles runs into the cafeteria and is continuously chased by the spider people as they attempt to pass him and get in front of him. Others are shown jumping towards him as a means of tackling. By this point, I'm not seeing the plot armor. Miles makes his way through the therapist's office, and we do see that he has in fact been chased by the same group of spider people in the cafeteria. The monkey attempts to blind him to open an opportunity for the others to web or tackle him. Webs are in the background but dodged by Miles, and another attempted to slam Miles while he was blinded by the monkey. A boomerang is thrown towards Miles and is dodged accordingly. As Miles is approaching a whole horde of spider people, the goal is now to rely on their numbers to close in the space he has to escape. As Miles runs, Webslinger attempts to shoot his web gun at Miles, which he dodges accordingly, even leading to two spider people being stuck. Miles ducks down and slides his web to get onto the horse without being webbed, then gets a hold of the horse. Some have questioned why the spider people aren't shooting webs while Miles is on the horse, but my question would be, where would they be shooting? Should they shoot at Miles or the horse? If they shoot at the horse, Miles can just leave and they have nothing. If they shoot at Miles, they'd have to actively stop in place to hold a strong position to stop him. They can't pull Miles strongly unless they stop running like it's a game of tug-of-war. But if Miguel stops running to do that, that means the people behind him will just bump into him and cause a nasty domino effect for the chunk running right there. If Miguel and his group falls over, that just gives Miles an unnecessary advantage. And that's just assuming they don't miss the shot, which is very well possible from a distance, which would make it in their interest to first catch up, then try to web him when you're closer, or try to attack him close up since their reaction times in close combat would scale close to each other. If Miles can dodge bullets, he can dodge webs. This is why they rely on the wolf to catch up to Miles and attack him, which would leave room for an opening. Miles blocks it off and is met with another horde of spider people. He shifts his direction to avoid being closed in, so they have to keep chasing him. The idea here is to continuously swarm Miles, so that he has very little directions he can go. This spider person uses comedy as a crutch, pretty self-explanatory plan. 60 Spider-Man was not prepared for a fight, and unfortunately pulled a muscle in the process of aiming for Miles. We see Miles enter strength and conditioning, and while he heads there, the spider people are trying to web him from behind but are simply missing due to how far they are and how quick Miles is. Miles manages to delay a good portion of them by trapping them under this workout machine. Throughout Miles trying to get around these decoy villains, they are constantly trying to web him while chasing him. I don't know why this group right here doesn't just swing above the gap. I don't know why they had to jump on this person T-posing here, so that is a problem that I will concede to. Next, we see Miguel at the go-home machine, prepared for if Miles attempts to go there. Miles does exactly that, but is forced away to this gap right here, which Miguel knew would lead Miles away from the machine. Believing Miles wouldn't be able to escape anywhere, this group of spider people try to talk him down by saying there's nowhere to run, in hopes he realizes it's pointless to resist and to give up without further violence. They're giving him a chance before having to roughhouse him, especially since Miles could dodge any webs they shoot, which is likely to create a crowded mess with each other if that's their first resort. And while Miles does start to resist, Miguel had a different idea than these spider people and immediately went in for the capture, and the reason no webs were shot at this point is so they don't interfere with whatever attack Miguel was planning, leading to Miles jumping out of the building. If they had shot their webs, there's a chance they would get Miguel and cause a delay in him being able to reach Miles. They all leave out soon afterwards, and it's important to note that because they're out of the building and outspread into the city, it's harder to keep track of Miles, and Miles having more places to run or swing would spread out the army of spider people. thus making it easier to not be jumped by a crowd of them in one enclosed building. Some have questioned why Miguel doesn't shoot at Miles while he's falling down, but Miguel is shown trying to descend closer to Miles before he does so, which would give him more opportunities to attack him. Miguel cuts off Miles' webbing and sets up just for an attack, which sets up Gwen to hold him. Miles of course easily rips it off while giving Gwen a stare indicating he doesn't trust her. Ben Reilly gets a hold of Miles in his well-defined musculature and attempts the sleeper hold on him. Miles blows up his web shooter to draw them away. Unlimited Spider-Man goes for a punch that Miles dodges and hits one of the other spider people. Reasonably, he's embarrassed by this. They fall and crash through this layer, and Miles evades by swinging away. Miles is on his way to pass through these pipes, then is webbed by Peter to isolate both of them from the chase. Reasonably, they lose him for a bit after this, since the way these pipes are aligned would have made it impossible for the spider people behind him to see where he was webbed. Peter has a talk with Miles trying to calm him down, then eventually Miguel catches on to Peter and Miles having met up, and the rest of them chase Miles. Miles relies on a very narrow pathway to evade them, which makes enough sense considering how limited in space the people chasing Miles are. For the rest of this fight, it primarily consists of Miguel and Miles. Miguel chases after Miles, and we get a really great callback to the What's Up Danger scene, as Miles falls down and tries to kick Miguel. Interestingly, Miguel blocks this one kick, but Miles prepares another as Miguel is occupied with that one. Miguel webs Miles before he can run too far away, and Miles retaliates with a web ball. Miguel continues to pursue Miles, and Miguel eventually gets a hold of Miles and restrains him. Miguel makes sure to slam Miles every time he attempts to charge up for a venom attack. However, Miles throws him off by highlighting the hundreds of spider people below them. He then takes the opportunity to start absorbing the energy from Miguel's suit, thanks to his new twist on his powers, then slams him against the hundreds of spider people there, creating a major hindrance in being able to catch Miles, allowing him the opportunity to race his way to the go-home machine when invisible. Now, I've seen people question why Miguel doesn't have anybody at the go-home machine to guard it, but he does, and he chose the person who is literally an avatar and not even technically there, and who is capable of being transparent to avoid being hurt by Miles if he does get there, and who can split themselves apart. Miguel was prepared. I've also seen a point questioning how Miles knows how to operate the go-home machine here. First of all, he doesn't actually work the machine properly. It gets sent back to the wrong dimension. It blows him very hard against an object, rather than relying on the basic safeguards that would be built into the machine. This also isn't the first time Miles has worked with interdimensional technology, since we do see him working with it in Into the Spider-Verse. Miles is also very smart and would be able to quickly pick up on what the machine labels are meant to indicate and proceed from there. One may say that Spider-Bite should have just shut down the machine, but she's under the impression that there's potentially a bug in the system, and she needs to keep the machine on to find out what it is. Only when Miguel gets there is when she would realize that this is related to Miles. However, we can tell that Spider-Bite is conflicted on whether or not she wants to send Miles back. We do know that there are some spider people that can be conflicted or downright against Miguel's cause, but still be part of the Spider Society. From the beginning, we already saw that Bite had a level of respect and admiration for Miles. She even tells him good luck knowing that Miguel is likely going to reject him or tell him the hard truths about the canon. If she wasn't sure she wanted to go along with Miguel's orders, then she wasn't fully sure about if she was completely in favor of Miguel's cause, and Miles laying down his perspective would cement that. Though it wouldn't do any favors to leave Spider Society if she felt changes could be made, so her being part of the society isn't proof she'd never be conflicted on whether she should let Miles leave or not. Something else that's key is that the scene where Bite allows Miles to go isn't saying that the Spider Society couldn't have caught Miles. It's not saying you have all these hundreds of spider people that can't catch one kid. If she was willing to shut down the machine, Miles loses. It was her willingness to help him that allowed him to escape, not just Miles running away from them. I've also seen some people say that the records of the go-home machine should tell Miguel which Earth Miles actually went to, but Bite would be responsible for dealing with those records in the first place. She's one of the people who primarily runs the go-home machine. Out of pure instinct, Miguel would bring in Jess and Ben to rush to 1610 to immediately ensure they have eyes on Jeff Morales and Miles' home. Bite would have given a false confirmation to Miguel that Miles is on 1610, and even alter records in the event Miguel were to look at them. So I don't think Miles being able to escape Spider Society is plot armor. Miles has the advantage of being one of the most powerful spider people out there, as well as being underestimated as a dumb kid with no plan, who has no idea what he's doing. In fact, Miles plays on this to beat Miguel. How Miles can escape is supported by cause and effect.
You're the original Anomaly!
This was set up excellently throughout the film. It truly forced me as an audience member to think about what Spider Society could have against Miles in the back of my mind as I was watching, as if they were predetermined to be against him. First, we get a hint by Miguel vaguely explaining why he doesn't want Gwen at Spider Society, hinting that there is something about her that leads him to question her ability to help them. The next hint is Gwen actively choosing to hide the real reason she's on his Earth and setting up her mission behind his back. Our next hint after that is Miles' questionable lack of invitation, which is amplified by Jess insisting that Miles can't be a part of this, and that Gwen knew the whole time, to the point she had to say she will never see him again, leaving both Miles and the audience fixated on what Miles could have done to cause such a stigma around his name. It makes Miles almost lose hope for his reconnection with his friends, only for him to believe he may have proved himself to Miguel when invited to Spider Society, which everyone but Miles is dreading. Miles walks in with hope, only to be met with immediate rejection, as if he has done something profoundly troublesome. This leads Miguel to break down the canon to Miles, and when Miles refuses to accept it, Miguel lets loose and drops a major reveal onto him to demotivate his spirit, to hammer home the damage he has caused, and can do if he doesn't listen. Miles was never supposed to be Spider-Man according to Miguel's canon, which further puts Miguel's ideology into perspective, and what would have helped him convince people onto his side. Because of Miles' spider bite, he left a world where there was no Spider-Man to protect them, no Spider-Man that could save the city or the world. It's a world that could implode at any moment without anyone there to help. It's a similar consequence to if Uncle Ben never died, thus never giving Peter Parker the motivation to protect the city and by extension the world. Miguel would be able to use Earth-42 as proof of what could happen if they disrupted Ben's death from happening. Miguel talks about how this anomaly has led to the death of Peter Parker on Earth 1610, because he had a choice between saving Miles and saving the entire world. Every world, and because he opted to save Miles, their world suffered as a result, and nearly destroyed the multiverse. It led to the creation of the Spot, the greatest potential for being a canon killer, and led to the unraveling of Pav's dimension. The canon had to course correct itself so many times, and Miguel is worried that it will eventually lead to a breaking point.
And all this time, I have been the only one holding it all together.
And even worse for Miles, he learned that his friends knew the entire time and never told him, and he came to the realization that he couldn't be seen by them because of this. Even after Peter tried to console Miles and reassure his self-worth by showing he had a kid because of him, Miles is now led to question that after learning Peter had it in the back of his mind that he was never supposed to see Miles because he was the original Anomaly, the Spider-Man that should never have been. He now has to think about Gwen's visit to him and question what that truly meant. Miles felt his strengths came from his connection to the other Spider people, what they'd have to offer him, but he thinks back to the people who never let him down, those who vowed to always be there for him, and have always tried their best to do so. His parents. And because of this, he can let go of his insecurities and feelings of inadequacy. Miles is ready to take on the Spot, to prevent him from taking his father away from his family, while also preventing him from causing further annihilation to the multiverse. He has an opportunity to save both, and he will try to do so just as he has done before, and inspire others to do it with him, as he has with his friends.
Do you know for certain what happens if he breaks the canon?
Do you want to find out?
Gwen takes what Miles says into consideration and questions if Miguel's reasons are rational. Miguel gave up on defending his position to Miles and instead opted to imprison him.
Goodbye.
Gwen already felt that was out of line, and her gut was telling her that there was something wrong with what they were doing. Miguel breaks Gwen and Peter's trust by telling Miles that he was the original Anomaly, when that goes against what they had talked about.
Oh, that's enough!
This isn't what we talked about!
It's a show of Miguel's willingness to act dishonestly in favor of his cause, which should raise red flags for those closely aware of this. He isn't fully transparent on what his intentions are, and Miguel also acts in a way that's noticeably more aggressive and forceful than he has ever been seen acting before, which starts to show layers of his character that haven't been seen before, as if his anger towards Miles has caused him to slip and worsen his image in their eyes. This motivates Gwen to question Miguel on his cause, and if he is even as certain as he claims to be. As opposed to giving a direct answer that proves that he is certain without a shadow of a doubt, he starts to walk in a threatening manner towards Gwen, as if he's trying to scare her into agreement rather than relying on actual reason. And to further escalate Gwen's frustration, he tells Jess that he was right at first to see her as a liability.
Tell him he's wrong.
He's not.
Similarly to Miles, Gwen feels betrayed. She knows how it feels. Gwen feels betrayed, as if Jess is going to allow her to be put back in the same desperate place she was before she was let in and given somewhere to belong. From Gwen's perspective, they should know why it'd be wrong to leave her behind, because they knew it was at the time they took her in.
You let him get away? I can't help you.
And what Gwen was afraid of came to pass. She was sent home by force to be lost and alone, accepted by nobody. She finally understands how it felt for Miles. At that point, she is cemented in her belief that Miguel isn't acting reasonable and shouldn't have been put in such a high regard as he was.
We are supposed to be the good guys.
Peter and Jess are noticeably uncomfortable by this. Jess's closest protege has been sent off to suffer alone. Peter feels that his friend has been wrongfully cast off for having rightful feelings of uncertainty for what Miguel is doing. What we thought could have been a working, healthy collaboration turned into a fallout. People are feeling betrayed left and right, left with questions on what the right thing is. Miguel angrily and assertively stands by his positions and pursues his hunt for Miles. Gwen is left anxious and lost upon returning to her world. Miles is left scared for who may be after him and for what's going to happen to his family and his neighborhood.
You think I'll be any good at this?
You're asking that now?
Peter goes back home with Mayday to reconsider all of his actions. As a mentor and a friend to Miles, as a hero, and as a father to Mayday. He asks MJ if he'll be any good at being a parent, and MJ reassures Peter that with how unique Mayday will be compared to everyone else, there will never be a strict guide for what the right choices will be in raising her, or being the hero Peter tries to be.
There's no playbook for raising someone like her, or being someone like you.
Peter and MJ are the first ones in their world to raise someone born with what Peter can do, so they can't just go by the commonly set rules by the world for how to raise someone. They'll have to improvise along the way, as if the unexpected will happen.
You just gotta make the right adjustments at halftime.
It's the same as making decisions as a hero like Spider-Man, versus a normal person with common everyday problems. In listening to MJ's advice, he's now questioning his agreement to Miguel's mindset of controlling and strictly abiding by the rules he sets. Peter never went by any kind of strict guide or expectations to teach Miles. Miles' growth came as a product of the unexpected happening. Peter remembered that Miles showed Peter that he can do both, in spite of Peter strictly insisting one of them had to die, and this pushed Peter to want to have Mayday after Miles gave him his second chance.
How do I know I'm not gonna mess it up again?
You won't.
Right. Hate to leap of faith.
Peter realized that it gave in to fear, just as Miguel did, which he almost did in Into the Spider-Verse. He realizes that MJ is right, that he shouldn't go into parenting or heroism under the mindset that the future is already set in stone.
This mask is my badge, and I'm trying to be good too.
Gwen first returns back home to retrieve her belongings, the last photo she had of Miles in physical form. When caught by her father, we see him try to take advantage of being able to see her again after having lost all this time with her. To try putting herself in her father's shoes, she tries to explain what this mask means to her. Even if she isn't operating under the law like he is, she wants him to understand that their actions are driven by the same morality, so that the difference truly shouldn't matter, and that it isn't worth their relationship falling apart. And knowing that her father believes he drove Gwen away in his pursuit to do what he believes is right, Gwen opens up to her father to show her vulnerability, and the fact that she herself drove a friend away in her pursuit to do what she believes is right. Both of them are put in a very similar situation, and Gwen's speech helps her father come to terms with that, and when met with the challenge of actually arresting Gwen, he refuses, conceding to what Gwen had to tell her, and realizing the impact this would have on not only himself, but to his own daughter. He had the same feelings of regret and distress that Gwen is having for driving Miles away. Both of them have come to realize that sticking with the established rules of their occupations isn't always the right choice, and sometimes they need to be broken to tackle issues in a more nuanced way. Both of them are able to mend their relationship because of their personal growth, which inspires Gwen to do the same for Miles through Hobie's help, which shows us that Hobie believed in Gwen enough that she would do the right thing and make it up to Miles.
I'm Spider-Man.
Miles starts swinging away, processing everything he's just experienced, in a sequence that feels like a dark and haunted version of the Leap of Faith scene in Into the Spider-Verse. That scene was hopeful, showing Miles' growth into becoming the hero he is meant to become. This scene is haunting, showing Miles' acceptance of hard truths, and fears for what will come next. Even the music sounds like it was taken from Into the Spider-Verse to sound more twisted and anxiety-inducing for Across the Spider-Verse. Even though Miles has grown past his insecure need to prove his worth to Spider Society, he still needs to take in the consequences this will bring to himself and the world as a whole. As shown earlier in the film, Miles remembers to keep going above all else.
You're on your way. Just keep going.
It's what prevents him from stopping and breaking down in fear and panic. It's what drives him to make it home.
I'm strong because of you and Dad. And then I went out there and now I'm not afraid of anything. I'm Spider-Man.
Miles' story of learning where his strengths lie and overcoming his fear of rejection will always be a journey that sticks with me, especially when building off a story where he learns to find his capacity for good in the face of self-doubt. I think a great starting point to follow up with that story would be to have him attached to where he found that good in himself, through his spider friends. He sees them as the people who made him as strong as he is because they pushed him to become a hero in the first place, which makes him afraid of the idea of never being accepted by them, or a greater network out there that does what they do. And when he comes to terms with the fact that he was never going to be accepted by them, he thinks back to those who always accepted him no matter what. This realization teaches him that his parents were just as important, if not more, in shaping him to the hero he became, because without their determination to always be there to support him, he never would have had the capacity for good in the first place. Miles is a good kid at heart, and his parents made sure of it, and at his worst moments, he would always have them to turn to, even when splitting up with his friends. This is what inspires his trust in telling them the truth. We've had an excellent journey for Miles Morales in these past 2 movies, and I'm really looking forward to what the 3rd movie will have to offer.
I say, you gotta let him
spread his wings, man.
What I love about this resolution is that it's not just Miles that's presented as someone who has some maturing left to do. Both of his parents, while always wanting what's best for Miles, have been driven to irrational decision-making out of fear for what happens to Miles if they let him make his own decisions, and in doing so, possibly harmed what could be a good friendship for Miles. Not knowing where he went or why he isn't home, both of them take the time to reflect and take accountability for how restrictive they were of Miles, and assess where they could have gone wrong instead of just blaming everything on Miles. For Jeff, it's a natural progression from the first movie because he often struggles to understand what Miles needs to hear or what is best for him, but he'll be insistent on pushing Miles further to motivate Miles to be better. It ties into the motif where Miles is consistently told where his destiny lies, and how his story is supposed to turn out. Miles' parents realize that Miles deserves to have a say in that. And as for Gwen...
One thing I learned from Miles, it's all possible.
Gwen's final payoff ties into her failures early in the film. She allowed fear to dictate if she gets close to people. She allowed fear to dictate her entire job as a superhero, even her friendship with Miles. Miguel easily utilized that to dictate how things should or shouldn't happen, and through her experience with Miles and knowing how betrayed he feels, understanding Miles' side of things, and through learning of where Miguel starts to break when challenged and where his weaknesses lie, she is able to think for herself and remember what drew her towards Miles, what made him stand out so much as a hero, and why she should form a band of her own with Miles' old friends to make up for her personal failings towards Miles. We start off the film with Gwen's story, we follow that by continuing Miles' story, and we end off with both of them at the same time, with plenty of ground left to cover on both sides. They are without a doubt our most important characters in this film, and I'm more than excited to see where the story goes next. I love this movie, if you couldn't tell already. I feel Across the Spider-Verse succeeded on every level, especially in terms of what a Spider-Man story should be. There are plenty of quality Spider-Man stories out there that have so much value to offer and are fairly close to me, but this one in particular was special for me. The character journeys in this movie were easiest for me to connect to, and the playful yet gorgeous art style makes every frame of this movie fascinating to look at, and this movie comes with outstanding performances across the board. Everyone clearly cared about what they were doing, even smaller cameos that communicate to fans that even the creators loved these adaptations. And even though I've been openly critical of quite a bit of them, the connection to their stories feels pleasant. Even if some of these adaptations were cut short, this film gives us a level of closure that lightens that abrupt cut their stories got due to cancellations. I think this movie was created by a team that truly cared, who truly had love for the character and the franchise as a whole. I'm super excited for what Beyond the Spider-Verse will have to offer, and I'm hoping it's even better than this one.